Welcome to the Genealogy Gems podcast. It's a show filled with family history research strategies and techniques, news and entertainment, and inspiration. And I'm your host, Lisa Louise Cooke. Hello, my friend, and welcome to Genealogy Gems podcast episode number 225. Hey, get ready for a fun and inspiring start to your genealogy year. I'm not going to lecture you about how to get organized and all that. You get enough of that new year pressure from other places. Today, I'm going to bring you a talented lady who's a sharp genealogist and just happens to be one of the hosts of the television series Genealogy Roadshow, Kenyatta Berry. And I had the pleasure of working with Kenyatta last summer when we filmed a webinar together. It was for Family Tree Magazine and Vivid Pick Software. And we did that at the Federation of Genealogical Societies conference in Indiana. Well, she was beaming from ear to ear about a new book that she was working on. And I encouraged her to get in touch with me when it was all done so that we could get together and talk about it here on the show. Well, the book turned out to be a beauty. It's called The Family Tree Toolkit, and it's a great overview for anybody who's new to genealogy. And really, it's kind of a quick reference manual for more experienced genealogists because of all the charts and the resources that she includes. Well, in the fall, she launched a short book tour, and she called me up and asked me to moderate her Dallas event. So in December of 2018, just about a week before Christmas, we met up at the main library in downtown Dallas. I've had the pleasure of speaking there in the past. They have a beautiful auditorium. It's perfect for this kind of an event. And this event was called An Evening with Kenyatta. Now, this was a wonderful opportunity to not only spend the evening with my friend and a room full of dedicated genealogists, but also to record it all and bring it to you. So, in today's episode, Kenyatta Berry shares how she caught the genealogy bug, busting through brick walls, her thoughts on DNA, and of course, some of the most memorable moments from Genealogy Roadshow. So, let's kick off the new year with some genealogical inspiration from Kenyatta Berry, live from Dallas, Texas. It is so nice to be back in the Dallas Public Library. I was here about a year and a half ago, and we did a 2-day seminar. This is a nice bunch of people, Kenyatta. You're going to love it. If you were not here at that seminar, again, my name is Lisa Louise Cooke, and I do the Genealogy Gems podcast and travel around like Kenyatta does speaking. But this time, I get to do the questioning, which is awesome. So let's talk a little bit. First of all, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
I'm thrilled that all of these people are here 5 days before Christmas. Aren't you impressed?
I am very impressed. Thank you very much for showing up.
I just want to kind of start at the beginning because one of my favorite things to ask people is about their genealogy origins, right? Mm-hmm. How we get started. I think sometimes when we hear those stories, it helps us actually look for those opportunities to maybe start somebody else.
Right.
What's your story?
So my story is a little interesting. Actually, it's different than most. Most people get started doing their own genealogy, right? Researching their family history. I started doing my ex-boyfriend's genealogy in law school. And because they were prominent African Americans in Atlanta, Augusta, and Charlotte, or Raleigh-Durham, actually, area, I started doing his genealogy because he had an unusual surname. So he was named after his second great-grandfather, George Henry Dwelly. I talk about this in the book. And his name was George Dwelly Lyons. So I thought, Dwelly, perfect. I can search for this. It's unique. And I found all this information about them because they were so prominent. And I thought, well, this is really easy because I found this biographical stuff. And so I was like, this is great. And one of the things that I learned and why I really got interested in slave genealogy is his second great-grandfather was enslaved. And he had a biographical sketch that stated his birthday, January 26, 1833. He was born in Columbia County, Georgia, sold twice as a boy, once to Alabama. He stated who his father was, which was a white man named C.J. Cooke, and his mother was a slave. And that was in my first genealogical experience. So I thought, this is great, right? So I was hooked. And that really kind of got me involved and very excited about it.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, just a riveting story right out of the gate.
Right out of the gate, yeah, absolutely.
I imagine you may have run into some challenges, though, because in researching people who were enslaved, I mean, you hit kind of a brick wall pretty quick, don't you?
Absolutely. So with my own family, they were enslaved in Virginia, Central Virginia. So for those familiar with Virginia, really around Culpeper, Madison, kind of what I refer to as a presidential plantation. So Monticello, Montpelier, the Highlands, right? So that's Madison, Jefferson, Monroe, those areas. And they were farmers. And so for me, it was really much like my family. They were enslaved and they were just farmers. So they really didn't have a story. But I realized that they did have a story. Every family has a story. And my family, they went from Central Virginia during Jim Crow to upstate New York. And half of them stayed in Virginia and half went to upstate New York. And I realized that even though they were enslaved, even though they weren't prominent, so to speak, that they still had something to share, and I wanted to tell their story, and which is why I tell their story in my book as well.
That's an amazing way to put it, isn't it? That your ancestors are sharing with you. Isn't that something?
It's awesome. That's why I love what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. So you started working for the ex-boyfriend. I hope he appreciated it.
He did not. That was the best thing that came from that relationship was genealogy, though.
Heck yeah, for all of us.
Yeah, exactly.
But what are some of the things after you got going? And when we get going, we start running very quickly, right? Yes. What are some of the things that you wish that people had told you, right? From the beginning, that you wish you had known before you had gone.
Cite your sources, people. I mean, that is the one thing. My original tree on Ancestry is ridiculous. I mean, it is so bad. I've wanted to start over 1,000,000 times. Like, I've done like a DNA tree that I kind of connect, but like it's called My Ancestors. That tree is just a nightmare. There's like multiple people, like 4 times. There's just like, everything's just wrong. And it was because I didn't know to cite my sources. That was one thing. The other thing is, I wish someone would have told me that, you'd stay up to 2 a.m. looking for dead people. Like, that wasn't something that they really...
They don't tell you because they know you'll think they're crazy.
Exactly, right? So no one told me that. I also think, understanding that it's more than names, dates, and places. One of the things we really do on Genealogy Roadshow is really talk a lot about the stories. Mm-hmm. And it's so important to tell that story. And a lot of times, as genealogists, we get caught up in the details and the nuances and everything. I mean, we heard it on the show, the feedback of, you make it look so easy, the way they edit it and everything. It's like they show up and all of a sudden we're just giving their genealogy, which is not happening. But it looks that way. But it's, as genealogists, we want to know every little piece, right? But the true connection, I think, for people is really the story. And that's the thing that I wish someone would have told me early on, is to really record and understand those stories.
That's a great point. And, I was reading somewhere you had talked about you're trying to kind of bring genealogy and historians together. And really, we kind of have to let the perfect trio bring the storyteller in as well. We have to have all those skills.
We do. And I've done a lot of work with historians. So for the past year-ish, I have worked with really historians of slavery. So anyone who knows me knows that from my approach to slavery is very academic. It's genealogical, but it's very academic. So I often try to understand a lot about the historical context as it relates to slavery, especially domestic slave trade. And in working with those historians, I'm like, okay, so you get a grant to go to New Orleans to research, I don't know, Franklin and Armfield, which is one of the largest slave trading companies, and you get to this database. But it sits on your computer. you have all this information that's useful to everyone.
Right.
And why don't you share that? You don't even understand it. So I've really tried to work with historians to say, think about the genealogists, think about the people who are impacted by this information, the people that need it. And I recently was at Cornell University. I got invited to Cornell, and I was, I don't geek out. I mean, I live in Santa Monica. I don't geek out on like celebrities. I geek out on like historians. Yeah. So I was in a room with a bunch of people whose books I had. So I was like, oh my God, there's Joshua. There's this Edward. There's like all these people. And but we were really talking about how can we digitize and index these records related to slavery and make them available for everyone so that they can use. And I just came as a genealogist, and I kept saying, you got to just remember, it's everyday people. It's not this ivory tower that you're in. And you really have this information that you have is valuable outside of just the book that you've written.
Every single family in America at some point gets touched.
Yeah, exactly. And they don't, but they're just, their ivory tower of their world. They don't understand it.
Mm-hmm. We need an ivory tower, don't you think? I don't know. I'd love to know, because I know that you've done an awful lot of research in your family, but when you talk about story, what's one of the stories that really touched your heart, that made a difference in you?
I think one of the things that really touched my heart is that my great-grandmother, Esther Lewis Kendrick, was born in Leroy. Should be called Leroy, but they call it Leroy. Leroy, New York, way upstate. And she left and moved to Detroit, which is where my grandmother, and I were born. And, when her husband died, she moved back to Leroy. And I went there when I was probably like 3 or 4, right? No memory of it whatsoever. But what touched me is in my search to find my family, I've been able to reconnect with cousins that are there. So I have really enjoyed building that bridge and kind of back to Leroy from Detroit. And they all remember my great-grandmother. They were like, oh, there are 3 old ladies that lived in the house. I was like, yeah, that's my great-grandmother. They were like, okay. So I love that because I have first cousins. I mean, I went, when I was working, so some people know this, most people don't, but when I was filming Genealogy Roadshow as well as writing the book, I was working full-time. As a software salesperson. So I had a sabbatical after 7 years, and on my sabbatical I went back to upstate New York, and I attended the 125th anniversary, and I write about this in the book, of the church my family's been attending since it was founded, and just being able to be there and connect with these folks, and just it's been amazing to me. And I go back all the time. Every time I go back to the Rochester area, the PBS station welcomes me. It's such a coming home for me. And I really feel like I'm doing my great-grandmother Esther a service by actually connecting with those folks.
Isn't that amazing? You're still serving them. The book she's talking about is the Family Tree Toolkit. And I have loved going through this because it was such a treat. I was like, oh, it's going to be all instructional. And then I start seeing Kenyatta in here. She's talking to you through the pages. She's giving you amazing amounts of construction. But you really told your stories. I could tell you almost couldn't help yourself, right?
I couldn't help myself. It was, I went to law school, and this is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Writing a book was hard. Yes. But I just sat down and said, what would I have wanted when I started? What would have helped me kind of get through this process? Because doing genealogy is very overwhelming.
Yeah.
I mean, it is a big process and project to do. And how do you get through those brick walls, right? Whether it's 1870, whether it's immigration, naturalization, whatever it might be. How do you keep motivated? And then where can you find these records, right? Because people think everything's online. It's not, by the way. A small portion is. You still need to go to the courthouse, everyone. But, I just really wrote the book thinking, 20 years ago, what would I have liked? And it became a labor of love.
Yeah, and I could see the motivation in it because you already anticipated what those of us who might be new to genealogy might not realize going into it is you get stuck. You get to brick walls.
Yes.
Anybody got a brick wall? Just
yes.
1, 2? Yes.
A couple people, yeah.
A couple people. I'm curious, what do you do
when you hit a brick wall, what do you do with it when it starts to get cold and it becomes a cold case? I mean, do you do what the police do, is put it in a cardboard box and stick it on the shelf? How do you deal with that?
There's a couple ways to deal with brick walls. I think you need to walk away for a moment and kind of reassess, right? So you get a brick wall and you kind of just say, okay, let me just get up from the computer, because a lot of times you've been working 2, 3, 5 hours, whatever number of hours on this, right? So that's one way to do it. The other part is Shelley Murphy has this thing where she does timelines for genealogy, and she always says, so what? So what? I found this information, so what? What is that, okay, I found this death certificate. It's only as good as the informant, so what? What information am I getting from there? So you really need to analyze and question what information you have in front of you. Because you then get a different picture and you get to look at it a little bit differently. So I think when you get to a brick wall, don't be discouraged. There's a way to break it down. It may take time. A year, 3 months, 5 years, who knows, but it may take time. But understand that you have to really step back and kind of say, what have I learned here? What do I know about this person? What other information? Re-examine the documents. I mean, a lot of times we always say with census records, when people get started, they just kind of look for the head of household and who's in the household. They don't look to the right. They don't look at anything else. They don't look at these non-population schedules. They don't look at any of that other stuff. They really just focus on head of household. This is what I got. These are people that are there. So it's like, take a step back and look at all the documentation you have for that person. And kind of understand what is their biographical sketch and what does it really mean.
I love that, because when you go back and you look at a document that you got a year ago, you're looking at it as a different genealogist, aren't you?
You are, absolutely, yeah.
So much further along, educated, you're more familiar with this family. And I imagine for you, do you find that you still look and go, whoa, I realize how far I've come just in my own research? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Kenyatta is such a delight. Coming up, we are going to dig further into how she has evolved as a genealogist and some of her favorite research strategies. Our sponsor for this episode is MyHeritage. They have over 70 million members worldwide. Now, if you're serious about making connections in the country where your ancestors once lived, hands down, MyHeritage is the place that you want to be. I uploaded my family tree hoping for a breakthrough in my German family line, and that breakthrough happened really quickly. I received a message from a distant cousin in Germany, and that was my first international cousin contact. And MyHeritage has a unique and powerful search system. It's called Record Matches. Now, this constantly culls over 8 billion historical records for your family. It's also the only family history interface out there using semantic analysis to search newspaper articles, books, and other free text documents. So find out what MyHeritage can do to help you grow your family tree. Visit myheritage.com. It's free to get started, so there's really no reason to wait, and there are billions of reasons to try it out. Visit myheritage.com. As I travel the world talking about genealogy, folks are always stopping me and asking for my advice on organizing and securing their family history research. And my standard answer is plant your family tree in your own backyard and share branches online. Planting your tree in your own backyard, it means keeping one master family tree in a software file right there on your own computer. That gives you ownership, control of privacy and security, and one central place to organize everything that you learn about your family. And of course, my software of choice and the one that I use is Roots Magic. I find that its tree building tools are second to none. And with Roots Magic Web Hints, you can see what record hints are available on Family Search, Find My Past, and MyHeritage. And now you have the ability to synchronize your Roots Magic database with your Ancestry tree and get those Ancestry.com web hints right there inside of Roots Magic. These are features that are really critical and they're exclusive to Roots Magic. So plant your tree today in Roots Magic and watch it grow. Get started at rootsmagic.com. Let's head back to Dallas, Texas in my conversation with Kenyatta Berry, host of the Genealogy Roadshow and author of the Family Tree Toolkit.
One of the things I always tell the story of when I first got started, not citing my sources and, cranking the microphone. I was looking for my third great grandparents. I was like, I can't find Emily Carter Sellers. I can't find her parents. And it's like literally if I'd scrolled up like 2 households, there they were. I was saying, oh, great. It's just something so simple as that.
Yeah.
But even looking back, on the documentation I have for them, I have these big binders that I have of, lawyers. We love to print. I like to recycle, but I do kill trees too. But we love to print stuff, and I literally go through these binders and look at everything and try to understand.
I love that idea because, you probably know this writing a book.
Mm-hmm.
I know it when I wrote my book. It was one thing to look on the screen.
Oh, yes.
It's another thing to print that page out and you think,
yes.
Oh, we are good to go. And you go, oh my gosh, what just happened here? And I think it's got to be the same for genealogy, don't you think?
I absolutely agree.
It looks different on paper.
It looks different on paper. I always print stuff out because then you see when you see it in front of you, you can see the gaps in that research. You see the gaps within kind of just things you maybe hadn't thought about. And that's, again, why I always say just step away from it from a certain point, and then that way you're able to come back and kind of, look at it with fresh eyes.
Well, the gaps are the opportunities.
They are.
Aren't they? Oh. Okay, well, we have to get down to the really important business, which is we have a lot of fans here of the Genealogy Roadshow, correct? Yes. So I noticed now, of the 3 hosts, you are the only one who was on the show from the beginning, all 3 seasons. Is that correct?
Yes. I mean, Josh was there in season 1 as well, but in the pilot, but yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's been 3 seasons. And of course, I've got lots of questions to ask about the show, but we have to ask you, will there be a season 4?
Well, we are hoping there will be a season 4. The show has not been canceled, so that's a good thing. FYI. The website's still up, so that's a good thing. What's unique about Genealogy Roadshow is that we actually do not have a member station sponsor. So if you think about Skip Gates, you think about Ken Burns, they have either Boston or DC or whoever, right? We work directly with PBS Corporate in Crystal City. That's very unique.
Right.
So then that presents a different, because we don't necessarily have a member station that's going out and saying, you need to renew Genealogy Roadshow. People are very interested. I think funding might be an issue, so write to PBS and tell them that you heard me and we need to be back on the air.
And that you need to come to Dallas.
And I need to come to Dallas, yes.
I noticed that Austin, they did in the first season.
We did Austin. Austin was interesting. That was our first, oh my God.
The first episode?
First episode. And I was up first. So we did... for those who are football fans, I did Earl Campbell. And I remember I'm talking to my lawyer because, like doctors, they don't operate themselves, so lawyers don't do their own contracts. So I'm talking to my lawyer, and I'm like, I'm doing some guy named Earl Campbell. He was like, wait, hold up. He's like, do you know who this is? I was like, no, I'm a Detroit Lions fan. I have no idea. So he, but it was amazing because they were like, I'm going to exaggerate. It seemed like 9,000 people there. It was like so many people just staring. It felt like it. They were staring at me and they're like, okay, go. And I'd never been on TV.
Wow.
So I was just like, okay, so there's a camera like sliding. Like if you and I are talking, there's a camera just sliding right back and forth in front of us. And then there's like some audience people over here. And there's a ton of people. And it was crazy. It was my first introduction. And I thought to myself, I don't know about this, but I ended up loving it, and it was great, and I've learned a lot, and it's been a wonderful experience for me.
Fantastic. I know a lot of people watch, and they do see let me show, I love your beautiful fingers. Let me just show you on the iPad, and she opens up.
I know, with the nails.
The images,
yes.
All the nails are beautiful. And people are looking at that going, oh, I just wish I could whip my iPad open and pull up a couple of fabulous documents. A lot goes into it. So tell us about the research and what's your involvement in it?
Okay, so there's a lot goes into it.
Yeah.
So genealogy and television is an interesting experience. Okay, television people are used to things just happening really quickly. So the first season, I will be completely honest with you, they were sort of like, you and Josh are host, so we're just going to try to just, here's the research, say it, just repeat this on TV.
And somebody else would do it?
Yeah, and we were like, no, that's not how this works, right? Because at the time, I was president of APG, and Josh was president of FGS. So we were like, our reputations are on the line here. Mm-hmm. Like, it's not, you think this is just TV. We know there are genealogists watching. You know how genealogists are, okay? So we knew that there would be some, we had to make sure. So what we did is they did have researchers. So we have a team of researchers that do kind of what I call the baseline research, right? Mm-hmm. Baseline, I mean census records and vital records, right? So birth, marriage, death. Season 3, for example, we got 10,000 people that applied for season 3. We only do 40 people per season.
So they must have to vet to determine, is there something there
They have to vet. They have to vet, right? And I had a quota of $8 million in software, so I was not trying to be bothered with 10,000 people. So I'm just to be honest. So I wasn't dealing with that. But once they vet, then we get the baseline research, and Josh really was instrumental in creating kind of a project management type of process, right, where we work with the researchers and we saw the research as it moved to different stages. And then once it got to a certain level, that's when we would come in and add our expertise, right? So we don't, I didn't spend time doing the census records, the birth records, all of that, but all the stories that I did, I knew the research in and out. We all did. We were all part of that process. The challenge we had is, typically that research is 3 to 4 months prior to folks coming on air. But the way they cut it, of course, it seems like they show up and we just kind of say, here's your genealogy. And that's not how it works. But that's the thing about TV, right? Because TV it would be great if we just had a show that was just strictly for genealogists and we showed every document. But TV is really about appealing to those who are interested, but not necessarily genealogists as well, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Was there conversation or debate amongst the production staff about, you guys were going to branch out, you guys were going to do real people, you weren't relying on the celebrity to be the draw? Was that ever an issue or a conversation within the production?
There was a conversation about that. So actually, Genealogy Roadshow started in Northern Ireland. Not a lot of people know that. It actually started in Northern Ireland, and we were the American version of it. And they had genealogists. So there were a couple of celebrities, semi-celebrities, that were interested, and the production told us we couldn't do them at all. So we were totally against. They were totally against doing any celebrities because you have Skip Gates, you have Who Do You Think You Are, and they really wanted to make it very similar to Antiques Roadshow and really for everyday people.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think everybody welcomed that, didn't you? Yeah. And then they all went, I want to be on it. So there's the question, how can they be on it if it comes back for season 4? And of course, it needs to come to Dallas. How could they be on the show?
So a great way for it to come to Dallas is for everyone in Dallas to apply.
Yeah.
That's the way. So we filmed actually in Los Angeles in season 3, our last episode, because a lot of people from LA applied to be on the show. Oh, okay. So if you go to, I think it's genealogyroadshow.org, is a casting application. And that's how you apply. The thing about casting is none of us, like Josh, Mary, and I, we have no say in that, right? I mean, it is a total production, LA casting company type of thing. But if you want to be on the show, one of the things is, don't submit something you already know the answer to, right? Mm. That's the thing. Make sure that, and then don't submit and then continue to do research, because that's annoying.
Well, you want that, oh my gosh moment.
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. But people can't help themselves, and I get it. Yeah. But yeah, I think if you get a lot of people from Dallas to apply to be on the show, and, we try to look for very unique and different stories. It's been interesting to deal with television people that are trying to be like, well, can we get something besides slavery? I'm like, no. This is part of our history, so you're going to have it at every junction, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Interesting. Okay, so I guess one of the questions that really came to mind as I was thinking about what I wanted to ask you about the show was, it's about the people. The people who come They've submitted their story. They've trusted you with it. And they really don't know what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. When you look back over 3 seasons, is there just one face from across the table that you go, oh, I remember that moment?
There are a couple. And I always talk about Gail Lukasik. I mean, she is will be bonded forever. And Gail was in season 2, and I wrote the foreword for her book. Gail and I have the same publishing company. We have the same agent. I mean, it's kind of crazy. But
she was a mystery writer?
Mystery writer, yes. And so with Gail, her mom grew up in New Orleans. And for anyone that researches in Louisiana, Louisiana is crazy. I love it because it's crazy, but it's crazy to research in Louisiana. And her mom was Spanish, French, and African. And because of the 1-drop rule and the rules in Louisiana, if you have 1 drop of, African blood, you're black. And so her mom was, even though she didn't look it physically, was identified as African American. And her mom passed. So she left New Orleans and she went to Ohio, and she passed as a white woman, married a white man, had Gail and her brother. And Gail just starts to do her research, probably 17 plus years ago, and realizes that, she's doing this research in the family history centers, and she's doing the microfilm, and she sees, her mother identified as Negro, and she's like, well, wait a minute, what is this? And she sees her grandfather and all of that, and she wrote to the state of Louisiana when she got her mom's birth certificate and said, well, wait a minute, no, this isn't true. And they literally said, this is the legal rule of being how we identify people who was African American or Negro. And so when that happened, Gail confronted her mother. And when she confronted her mother, her mom said to her, how will I hold my head up to my friends? Which is so sad. And she denied it at first, and Gail came with the information. And her mother said, you can't tell anyone until I die. And then 4 months later, her mom died. 4 months later, she was sitting across from me. And I was petrified because in African-American culture, you never call anyone as passing. You could see them on the street, know they're passing, but you would never call them out. So I was just like, okay, does she know for sure? And they were like, yes, she knows for sure for her mom.
She was there?
She was there. No, it was just Gail.
Okay.
And I was just like, okay, but I was just concerned about with Gail, because I knew what I was going to tell her. So if you think about what stands out is I knew what I was telling her wasn't just about her mother. It was about her grandfather. It was about her grandmother. Like I had this
whole family.
I had this entire history. And, she shows up and I'm sitting across from her and I'm just like, this is about to rock her world. Like, I'm going to change this woman's life. And, what was really interesting about it, and Gail and I will probably at some point in 2019 do a tour together, is, her mom, so her grandfather was married to her grandmother, and they got divorced. So they had 3 girls. They get divorced, get remarried. Her mom was pretty much... she was kind of shady on the secrets, you know what I mean? Dates didn't match up, all of that stuff, right? And, but her grandfather remarried, had 4 kids. Wow. Had a son, Azamar Frederick Jr., because his name was Azamar. And Gail shows up, show airs, and Gail's cousin, Stephanie Frederick, one of her friends, watches Genealogy Roadshow and says, you've got to contact this woman. You're related to her. Azamar Frederick Jr. is still alive. His daughter is Stephanie. Gail has since reconnected with her entire family. Which
she said on the show she really wanted to do.
Yeah. And she reconnected with her entire family. And she had a launch party for her book in December of last year. And I went there and they were like, we wouldn't have known if she wasn't on Genealogy Roadshow. And that to me is the reason why I left my software job, well-paying software job, to do this full time, is because, that was one of those moments where I realized I changed someone's life. Like it's so much bigger than just telling a story or, you know what I mean?
I really felt like when I watched it, you gave her back a part of her life. I can't imagine living your life denying a piece of yourself. And And you probably see that often in DNA as well, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, when you think about DNA, you know, these non-parental or these events that come up with half siblings and all of that, people don't realize that happens a lot more, you know, than the average. I think with DNA, it gets you to a certain point. Mm-hmm. It gets you to that, you know, I want to connect to Africa, I want to figure out this ethnicity or that, but it doesn't necessarily give you that most recent common ancestor. And that's what I talk about in the book as well, is with DNA, it's a good thing, but it's also, I liken DNA to the Wild Wild West. And I love that because when I started, my area of law that I studied was internet law. So back in 1999, when Amazon, before Jeff Bezos,
Wild West.
Yeah, before Jeff Bezos was like, you know, I don't know, just super filthy rich. But what Amazon I really would deal with was around, if you're in Dallas, if you're in Texas, and you buy something from Amazon in Washington State, then what law governs if there's a dispute?
Yes.
Yes. So that's,
I remember that.
Yeah. So that's the type of stuff that I would deal with, and I think DNA is really like that right now, because we've seen, for the genealogists in here and those that are not genealogists to understand, is with these cold cases, right? We've seen that JED match. Everybody, who doesn't love JED match? I mean, we just upload our raw data to JED match and we're going to town, right? And then we don't realize that actually now police are using that to solve these cold cases where some well-meaning genealogist in your family was just trying to figure out who your cousins were, and all of a sudden they're catching murderers, you know? And that's really what's happening. So with DNA, I think we're going to hit a phase, or we're going to see in the next couple of years where there's going to be more regulation around it. People need to really, really be mindful of the terms and conditions when you take a DNA test. Read those. I know it sounds boring, but you need to.
Because they are addressing health. I was just reading up on this the other day, and even if they say, oh, we're going to take your name off of it, or we're not going to give you these, they are. And what I've noticed in my own research of it is that DNA data is big money. Mm-hmm. It is way more than genealogy. If you think, you know, GEDmatch, you know, cold case investigators spotted that and went, oh, there's a DNA database I didn't have my hands on. You know that insurance companies and other people who have a vested interest. So talk about that, because we've all jumped in and now we're all going, what's happening?
Yeah, no, it's. I think to your point about researching, I believe that there is something. I'd seen a statistic maybe in like 10 years, it's like a $20 billion industry.
Oh yeah,
the consumer DNA.
And not just for genealogy, that's a little piece of it.
Yes, that's a little piece of it. Yeah, no, but that's and you've seen just the commercials and everything else. So I think with genealogy and DNA, and they're saying they're taking your name off and the data, look at the agreements. You know, 23andMe signed something with a pharmaceutical company, right? And I've talked about this.
Which is owned by Google.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I've... you know, full disclosure, Family Tree DNA is a sponsor of my book tour.
Well, we get to have her here. Thank you, Family Tree DNA.
Yes, yeah, they are sponsored by my book tour. But it was the first DNA test that I took, actually. Yeah. I did the mitochondrial, the mtDNA test with them. And they have committed to not selling your data to third parties. I mean, I've toured their facilities in Houston. We were going to do something for Genealogy Roadshow. It didn't make it. But they're the only one. I mean, Ancestry and 23andMe, they already send your stuff out to third parties, right? So you there's that one chain, right? Mm-hmm. If you think about chain of custody, if we want to get real serious about police type of stuff, the chain of custody, like your DNA is now going to a third party for them to analyze it. And then, they can take your name off, but what are they doing with that data? That's why I say it's the Wild West, because people don't know what to do. They don't know what they don't know. They don't know what to do with it right now. Mm-hmm. They're sort of like, it's so popular, everyone loves it, and people often think, every time I say I'm a genealogist, oh, I did 23andMe. I'm like, that's not genealogy, that's a DNA test. You know what I mean? It's like, but the people, they see that because they see the test, and consumers just really need to be informed, I think.
A lot of the folks who've seen the commercials are shocked to see matches show up in the system. That's the whole, they're like, oh, wait a minute, I thought I was getting a pie chart, and now I've got people popping in. What's happening?
Absolutely.
That can be a real surprise. And
it can be. It can be a real surprise to get people showing up. I also think when you do get people showing up, please do not just email me and say, give me your tree. Okay? After 20 years, I'm not going to just turn it over to you. Okay? That's not going to happen. But you also, people showing up that could be half siblings or cousins or, I have folks that have contacted me that have been adopted and I'm like, I have no idea, especially with, African-American genealogy. If I get into a third cousin, I'm already back into slavery. So your ancestor, our relative could have been sold down the river to Louisiana or Mississippi or Alabama, and I have no idea, right? And you're right, people don't understand what they're getting themselves into. That's why consumers need to be informed. And I feel like it's our job as genealogists, professional genealogists, to do that and inform them.
One of the things I'm always interested to ask a DNA expert as yourself is when you're looking at DNA, which I think of as one of the records, and then you're looking at all the genealogy records and the paper, how do they stack up? I know what they can do for the person who doesn't know who their father is or who was adopted. But what if you're the person with the 1850 brick wall? How do you see, how does DNA stack up? And if you only had 6 hours, where would you put your time? Would you be in the library with the documents or would you be working on your DNA matches?
I would be in the library with the documents.
That's right.
Yeah, because I feel like with DNA, in great example, I have a gentleman that I am related to who family has never left Mississippi. Always been in Mississippi. We have a common surname, Payne. My family has never been to Mississippi. They've always been Virginia. So we are really trying to figure out, and I think I've narrowed it down to either my fifth or my fourth great-grandmother who had a child that was sold down the river, as they say, but sold in a domestic slave trade to Mississippi from Virginia. But I spend my time in the documents looking for that, as opposed to trying to triangulate and do all this other stuff with DNA and figure that out, because I know we're related. I kind of know the link. So let me figure out from these Payne ancestors, right? Mine is Payne, his is Paine. So let's figure out how they got there, what information I can, find in the slave trade to get those names and really kind of get those documents. So I think with DNA, it's just a tool and toolkit. It's not the end-all, be-all.
And it's interesting because right now there's such a phenomenon around it that we're all, everybody's just pouring their heart and soul into every waking moment is about DNA. And yet every time I kind of work with both, my big payoff came off, at the library or with the documents or with the story.
Absolutely. The documents tell the story. DNA is just,
people.
Yeah, and DNA is just one piece. It's a small, small, small piece of the puzzle, right? And the thing that's so interesting is Ancestry changed their algorithm, whatever they did, whereas recently, so the DNA results that I show that are in my book, The Family Tree Toolkit for Ancestry, are totally different now. Totally different. They had me at 44% Ivory Coast, Ghana, then that dropped to like 12% or something. Like, it's totally different because they've changed it. And the other thing about it is you think about DNA and doing that, people who have disposable income, I can spend $79, I can spend $59, I can spend $99 on DNA, do DNA. Most people that grew up in the inner city like I did in Detroit are not spending money on DNA, right? So that pool is going to be a little different.
It's not a cheap hobby, is it?
It's not a cheap hobby.
In the book, I was looking at, I was thinking, I would absolutely hand this to somebody who's new to this because they're going to have what they need at their fingertips all the time. But I know we have I recognize a lot of very seasoned genealogists in here. So I'm interested in how you dealt with that. How did you address the needs of a newbie while still filling in where the seasoned genealogist really needs the help?
A lot of that I addressed in adding historical, just little tidbits of history.
I noticed, yeah.
Yeah, so that was a big thing. I wrote this book during the 2016 campaign. So I was literally watching C-SPAN American History TV about immigration and naturalization. That's like one of my biggest chapters. And watching documentaries on Chinese exclusion acts in Italians in America and everything, right? And I literally was like, let me add something about history so that people get intrigued and they want to learn more. I mean, one of the kind of the most obscure things I think I added was the 1840 census, where the American Statistical Association actually issued a report for the 1840 census because the free people of color enumerated in 1840 in certain towns were listed as idiotic, dumb, and insane. You know how those phrases from that time frame. And in those towns, some of those towns, there were even free people of color. So they were just listing them as a way to kind of show that free black folks it wasn't good for them to be free. And so the ASA basically said, we need to audit this because we've seen that this isn't true. I mean, that's something no one would ever know that, right? No one would ever even think about that. But the fact that there were towns that they were not even free people of color and they were listed as idiotic, insane, or if there were more people than free people of color that were listed as that was something I thought was very unique. So for the seasoned researcher, I'm thinking this is something you add to your lectures, to what you're talking about, because again, genealogy is history. I didn't get interested in history until I started doing genealogy.
And you have to know the history of the records as well, don't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You need to. I mean, it paints a full picture. I mean, and that's the important part. And I think also with the book, we genealogists, we tend to specialize in certain things, right? So some of us may do military, some may do immigration, some may do DNA. But you need to know a little bit about everything. And I think that was really sort of my thing. It's like, okay, well, if you're rolling around in military, check out this immigration chapter, right? If you're doing this, get to know a little bit. Because I learned a lot in just writing the book and researching it.
So you've been at this a while now. What did you just beeline to? What just resonated every time you got to go into those kinds of records?
So I think the thing for me, I focused on beeline into enslaved genealogy because of my law degree. Mm-hmm. I am able to remove emotion. So I'm able to look at a record set of profit, it sounds cruel, but profit and loss on human chattel. And I'm able to just take my emotion out of it and, go through those records, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that's sort of where I kind of beeline to, and because it's challenging. And I love a challenge, unfortunately.
Well, I know everybody here is probably chomping at the bit to ask you some questions, but one of the final questions I wanted to ask you is, how would you be a different person if genealogy just wasn't part of your life?
I don't even know. Wow, that's a great question. I don't even know how to answer that because I don't think I would be where I am if genealogy wasn't a part of my life. I really feel like this is my calling. This is sort of why I'm here. Mm-hmm. Pretty much. I mean, I really feel like, I want to help people find their people. And I want to reconnect families torn apart from slavery. And I've always wanted to bring genealogy to the masses. I've never been a person that wanted to lecture at standard conferences, right? I never wanted to be like, I'm going to go to NGS or FGS or, so NGS, National Genealogical Society, or Federation of Genealogical Societies, because I've always felt like I want to get people interested. I want those folks to get excited as much as I'm excited. And I actually don't know what my purpose would be if I didn't do genealogy, because it is my passion and it's my life.
Whether genealogy is your life and career, like it is for Kenyatta and for me, or whether it's your daily obsession or something that you just dabble in when you get a chance, you can't help but be revved up to jump back into this new year of 2019 after hearing from Kenyatta Berry. Her book is The Family Tree Toolkit. It's really wonderful, and you can grab a copy through our link in the show notes for this episode. This is episode 225. In the Genealogy Gems app, if you're listening that way, you'll find the show notes in the details section. It's right below the play button for this episode, or just head to genealogygems.com/podcast and click episode 225. And if you did enjoy this episode and you do get the book, we so appreciate when you use our links because it helps us bring this free podcast to you each and every month. So thank you so much for your support. And thank you to Kenyatta Berry and to the Dallas Genealogical Society for hosting us. Well, thanks so much for joining me for Genealogy Gems podcast episode number 225. Now, before I let you go, I got to tell you about an amazing discovery I made this week. And this is actually thanks to the guest I had on episode 223, Dr. David Haas. Now, as you'll recall, David shared his family's history of making home movies and the hours of old film footage dating all the way back to the 1920s that he had restored and digitized. His story really inspired me personally to start digging through my closets, and I found the canisters of these 8mm home movies that I had digitized back in the 1990s to VHS. Now, the problem with that first conversion is that, one, of course, VHS is completely obsolete. But two, the film, which dated back to the 1960s, was converted in its deteriorated state, where it was in the 1990s, which was kind of washed out and grainy. It had sat in different closets of varying degrees. It was really hard to clearly see everything that was on these films. Well, in December, after I did the episode, I sent the original films off to the same company that David had used. He talked about video conversion experts in Chandler, Arizona. Now, right after the new year, it was, I think, the 2nd of January, these fully restored and digitized films arrived on my doorstep, along, of course, with the original canisters. So I got all the
and it oozes out of this book.
The results are jaw-dropping. I mean, the films came back in glorious color, just like if you looked at some of the ones that David did that we had on the show notes, just like those, clear as the first day that they were taken back in the 60s. And now they are finally in the digital format that I can use for all kinds of projects and for sharing with people. But here's the kicker. In reviewing them, I made a startling discovery. About 20 minutes into the film, my great-grandfather came on the screen. Now, this is the only known film of him in existence. And I was absolutely floored that I hadn't spotted him before. But you know what? The VHS was so washed out, it just wasn't obvious. I mean, and I wasn't looking for him. I wasn't even expecting to see him on the screen, so he just didn't jump out. But now I can see him smiling and standing there with his son, who was my grandfather, and his son, who's my uncle. It was 3 generations of Burkett men standing there, and the oldest one was born in 1880. And all of it was there on the film for me to see. I got to tell you, you guys, I love finding genealogical documents, but I would take moving pictures of my ancestors any day of the week over a genealogical document. It just goes to prove that you can never say never, that at any given point, something can surface that you thought would never be possible. Now, video conversion experts did a phenomenal job, but that's not very surprising because they're one of the top labs in the country. They restore video for movies and for TV and all kinds of professional folks. They do offer varying levels of restoration, so you have to kind of take into account where you're starting from with the type of medium that you have and really how far you want to go and really how much you want to spend because it's not cheap. But if you need that restoration, and I really felt like these films, as old as they were, really needed full restoration and maybe even taking it a little better than they were originally, maybe adding some stabilization and that type of thing, which they know how to do. It's an investment you're not going to regret. I know I certainly don't. In fact, I just got an email. Let me pull this up. Actually, this wasn't an email. It was a comment on the episode 224 where I was kind of following up to this conversation I had with Dr. Haas. And Jody commented on the website. She says, the episode about home movies and David Haas was wonderful. I had also found some old film footage when my parents moved back in 2011. I debated about getting them transferred to digital because of the price. I can appreciate that. But my father was just diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and I'm so glad that I spent the money to get the project done. He was able to see the old films of his family and explain to me who some of the people were. What a gift. Thank you for encouraging people to do this and sharing all of your knowledge with us so graciously. And Jody sent me a link to her videos, and she seized the day and did exactly what we were talking about in episode 224. She took it to the next level, not just digitizing them, but get them out, get them up online on YouTube. You can do that for free and make them available to other people. One, it's a super easy way to share with your family, but two, you might also really be a blessing to another family where, somebody in their family shows up in your movie. Or you've got film footage of a location that fits right in their family history and they would love to see it. So I will have the link in the show notes to Jody's movie so you can see this. And you know what? She did a tremendous job with the documentation in the video descriptions. I was talking about that in 224. It's absolutely brilliant the way that she included linked timestamps to the various videos that she had already posted on YouTube. So that if somebody was watching it and they said, oh, this fits right in with what, affects my family, they could click these timestamps and get to other locations within the video and to other videos on YouTube. So she really took to heart that conversation that we had on episode 224 about how to share the videos and how to not only digitize them, but how to share the videos. And yesterday, I received a batch of VHS tapes back from Larson Digital. They converted them for me. Now, I've known Kristen Larson for several years. She was at the Genealogy Roots event. They really offer an excellent and affordable option that is safe, reliable, and great quality. If you're not looking for the movie level type restoration, but you want to get these done at a price you can afford and that you get them back. And here's the thing, they really stand out because they can pretty much convert anything you have. I sent them myself VHS, mini DVs, which were the little video cassettes that we took in the 90s. And those were all my kids, when they were young. I also had a small reel of audio tape. Now, this came from my uncle, and I think he recorded in the 60s. And I had some cassette recordings that I had done of interviews with my dad many years ago. They handled all of it. It was amazing and very affordably. And Kristen and her team will communicate with you along the way so you can really rest easy. It's so scary to send your stuff off. And it's in good hands because they're keeping in touch with you and you know exactly where you are in the process and when you're going to get it all back. I have about a zillion family history projects that I want to do now because I have these audio interviews in the MP3 digital format that I need them in. And one of my first plans is to create some Animoto videos because I can just drag and drop these MP3 audio files along with the scanned photos I've been scanning at home and put them together because the audio describes the pictures. So you can contact Larson Digital if that sounds like a better fit for you. They are at larsondigital.com. Larson has an E, it's an E-N. And be sure with them, they're offering us, because Kristen's so wonderful, she's giving us 15% off your order. So if you go with them and you decide you want to get some stuff done, use GEM, G-E-N like Nancy, G-E-M like Mary, as your code, and you'll get 15% off that order. Now, we don't have a promo code with Video Conversion Experts because I didn't know them prior to us doing these episodes. But please be sure that you tell them that you heard about it here on the podcast. And as I understand it, they have an email that you can sign up for, and they'll alert you when they run their next sale. So they'll have future discounts, and I understand that they run them periodically. When I turned mine in, they were having a big sale over Christmas. So it definitely saves money, particularly when you're investing a lot of money into the restoration side of things. And lastly, head to Instagram.com/genealogygems to see that restored video of my great-grandfather. Instagram is my absolute favorite social media platform. I mean, if I'm going to spend time on one, that's where it's going to be. And one that I post to personally nearly every day. You can download the app, the Instagram app, to your phone for free. And you can do that through the App Store on your phone. And then just go in and search Lisa Louise Cooke in the app and tap follow, and you can follow along with me. I post genealogy tips and ideas, behind the scenes stuff, and of course stuff about my family, me, what we're doing. It's a lot of fun. Instagram's totally free, so I hope we'll see you over there. Follow me, comment, let me know you're there. And we're going to have a lot of fun this year, you guys, because in the next Genealogy Gems premium podcast episode, which is going to be number 167. Yep, when you're a premium member, you've got 167 episodes commercial free as part of your membership. Premium members are going to hear the Q&A that we did with Kenyatta Berry after that interview was over. Okay, so you heard the interview. Then we had another, 20, 30 minutes. We had a ton of fun. She answered all kinds of questions. So if you're not a member yet, you can fix that at genealogygems.com/premium-membership. Or you can just get to the subscription page through the main menu under premium. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I loved meeting with you. Can't wait to talk to you again. Thanks so much for listening, friend. I'll talk to you soon.